You have felt it happen. A man enters a room, and something in the people around him rearranges. No one can name it. They just lean. He does not speak first. He does not explain himself. He does not reach. And yet the room keeps returning to him, the way a compass keeps returning north. Here is the part almost nobody admits. What they are responding to is not mystery. It is not status. It is not the performance of being unbothered. It is stillness. And stillness is the most attractive force a man can have, because desire follows the man who is not asking to be desired. Standing whole without the room. Most men live in a state of constant, exhausting performance. You walk through life with an invisible microphone, broadcasting your achievements, defending your mistakes, and begging the world to agree with your worth. You announce your plans, post your workouts, and argue with strangers online. You believe that to be strong, you must be loud, and that to be respected, you must dominate the airwaves. But the louder you get, the more you expose how much you need the world to look at you. Real presence does not demand attention. It commands it by refusing to participate in the competition for it. The most noticeable person in a room is often the one doing the least to convince everyone of it. Think about the people you encounter who constantly need recognition. They speak over others. They turn every disagreement into a competition. They tell you how successful they are before you have even asked, and they desperately need the last word in every dialogue. Strangely, the harder they work to establish their status, the more you begin to question it. They appear frantic, dependent on the feedback of the room to remain stable. Their self-image is a fragile structure that requires constant reassurance from those around them, leaking energy with every word they say. Then there is another kind of man. He listens. When someone makes a cheap joke at his expense, he smiles gently. When someone disagrees with him, he considers it calmly. When someone walks away from him, he lets them go without a chase. There is a peculiar psychological effect here. When a person is not desperately trying to control how they are perceived, other people have to do the interpreting themselves. An interpretation creates curiosity. The viewer is no longer being handed the answer. They have to assemble it piece by piece, wondering what deep source of security this man possesses. When you sit in a room and refuse to fill the silence, you stop asking for permission to exist. This is the first crucial shift. You realize that your value does not decrease because someone fails to notice it. A gold coin lying in the dirt does not lose its worth just because the crowd walks past without looking down. The crowd is blind. The gold remains gold. The moment you stop trying to convince the blind that you are shining, you reclaim the energy you have been wasting. You stop performing, and you start becoming solid. When you stop broadcasting, your actions begin to speak in a frequency that noise cannot drown out. Silence acts as a blank canvas, and because you do not paint your own praise, other people are left with no choice but to project their deepest curiosity onto you. When you are solid, you are no longer a drifting satellite looking for a planet to orbit. You become the center. The people around you begin to feel this shift in gravity. They sense that your value is self-contained, not borrowed from their attention. This self-containment creates an invisible, powerful pull. Because you do not need their validation, they feel a sudden, quiet urge to seek yours. The room begins to lean toward you, pulled by the magnetic force of a man who is entirely complete within his own boundary. Silence as a boundary. Think about the last time someone demanded to know why you made a decision. Perhaps you changed jobs, ended a toxic friendship, stopped replying to passive-aggressive messages, declined an invitation, or simply changed your priorities. Instantly, a familiar panic set in. You felt an almost physical obligation to build a courtroom case for your own life. You listed your reasons, detailed the circumstances, and defended your intentions. You talked and talked, hoping they would finally understand and nod in approval. But the more you explained, the more handles you gave them. Every explanation you offer is an invitation to a negotiation. You are handing them a map of your doubts. You are saying, "Here are the weak points in my defense. Please tell me if my choices are acceptable." A grounded man does not negotiate his life. He states his reality and leaves it there. He does not say, I cannot make it because my schedule is too busy and I have a family commitment. He says, I won't be able to make it. No excuses, no defense, just the boundary. This makes people incredibly uncomfortable. They want you to explain because explanations give them access to your uncertainty. They want to find the part of you that still feels guilty, the part that still needs their permission. Once they find that part, they know exactly where to press to make you move. But when you offer them nothing to press against, the entire game breaks. They are left holding their own demands, staring at a wall of quiet composure. When you do not appoint judges over your decisions, you strip them of their gavel. Every time you stay quiet and let the silence hang, you are reclaiming your mental property, drawing a clear line in the sand and refusing to let them walk through your clean garden with their muddy boots. This quiet boundary is deeply attractive. A man who holds his ground without needing to justify it communicates a rare, unshakable safety. He does not require the world to agree with his coordinates before he can stand. When the room realizes they cannot negotiate your boundaries, they stop trying to control you. They realize that you cannot be bought with praise or threatened with disapproval. This realization makes them quiet down, and they begin to drift helplessly toward your solid, uncompromised center. Power of delayed reaction. We have been conditioned to believe that a fast response is a sign of intelligence and strength. If someone insults you, you must hit back instantly. If someone criticizes you, you must defend your ego before they even finish their sentence. But speed is the ally of conditioning, not wisdom. When you react immediately, you are not choosing. You are being programmed. Imagine a master puppeteer. Every time he pulls a string, the puppet jumps. In the social world, your emotional reactions are those strings. A sarcastic remark from a colleague, a dismissive look from a stranger, or a delayed message from a woman you care about. These are all hands reaching for your strings. If you immediately become angry, anxious, or defensive, you have handed them complete control over your internal state. You have volunteered to be disturbed, allowing their carelessness or malice to dictate your peace. Stillness takes the batteries out of their remote control. When you feel the urge to react, pause. Take 3 breaths. Let the silence stretch for 5 uncomfortable seconds. The other person expected an explosion, a defensive shield, or an apology. Instead, they get nothing. Your non-reaction acts like a black hole. Their provocation is swallowed by your silence, leaving them exposed in their own hostility. You are no longer participating in an emotional transaction you did not choose. You are governing your own mind. This is the power Epictetus spoke of when he warned us about handing our minds over to anyone who happens to attack us. If a stranger tried to take physical control of your body, you would fight to the death. Yet you hand over control of your mind a dozen times a day to anyone who makes a sharp comment. Reclaiming your stillness is the act of locking the gates of your inner fortress, deciding who has access and who does not. The pause is attractive because you are not owned by the room. When you do not react instantly, people realize that their words do not have the power to shake your foundation. They see a man who owns his own nervous system, and that self-possession acts as a powerful magnetic force. The room quietens and begins to lean toward you, eager to align with a mind that remains unmoved in the middle of chaos. If this is landing somewhere specific in you tonight, stay with it. The next part is where stillness stops being a tactic and starts becoming gravity. Silent observation and execution. When you stop rushing to speak, you begin to observe. Most people cannot tolerate silence. It makes their insecurities crawl to the surface. If you sit in a meeting or a conversation and simply listen without interrupting, an incredible psychological phenomenon occurs. Other people will start filling the empty space. They will talk too much, explain things nobody asked them to, and eventually reveal their true intentions. You do not have to interrogate anyone to understand who they are. You simply have to stop interrupting the evidence. A former friend who wanted control rather than connection will show their resentment when you no longer chase them. A partner who tests your boundaries to find your limits will expose her own need for reassurance through conflict. A colleague who relies on noise to look important will unravel when their words are met with quiet, analytical attention. Stillness makes you a social analyzer. You see the fear behind the arrogance, the weakness behind the anger, and the desperation behind the constant boasting. But the greatest power of this observation is that you do not use what you see to attack. You do not point out their flaws or argue with their illusions. You simply note the information. You adjust your boundaries quietly, without announcement. You step away from people who require you to betray your peace, and you do it without a dramatic trial. Your silence becomes a filter, keeping your inner circle clean and protecting your energy for the things that actually build your life. This silent execution extends to your own goals. Epictetus used a profound image for this kind of silent growth. Sheep do not throw up the grass to show the shepherds how much they have eaten. Instead, they inwardly digest their food and outwardly produce wool and milk. Do not show people your intentions. Show them the result. When you stop narrating your plans and simply execute them in silence, your progress becomes an undeniable reality. When you declare your goals too early, your brain releases a false sense of achievement, burning the fuel needed for the actual work. But when you remain quiet, that energy is preserved and hammered into concrete progress. This quiet certainty is intensely attractive. When you do not recruit an audience for a process that needs privacy, you protect your momentum. People are naturally drawn to a man who builds in private and lets his results speak for themselves, pulling their respect and interest toward his quiet, unstoppable momentum. Mirror of absence. The real test of stillness is never when life is calm. It is easy to appear anchored when the sea is flat. The test arrives when you have something to lose. It arrives when the person you care about becomes cold and pulls her presence away. Your instinct is to scream into the storm, to send the long paragraphs of explanation, to beg for reassurance, and to chase her as she runs. But when you chase, you confirm her assumption that your emotional survival depends on her presence. You prove that she has the power to destroy your world. Your loud panic tells her that your peace is chained to her decisions. Stillness under pressure is the coldest form of strength. It is the ability to feel the terror of loss, to feel the sting of betrayal, and to remain completely motionless where it matters. You do not pretend it does not hurt. You do not perform indifference, but you refuse to let your pain dictate your actions. You do not send the late-night message. You do not demand a trial. You accept the silence she gave you, and you make it permanent. When you go silent and withdraw your performance, you create an empty space. This is the crucial moment. Humans cannot tolerate a vacuum. They crave reaction, validation, and attention. When you refuse to fill that void with arguments, explanations, or pleas, she is left alone with her own reflection in the mirror of your absence. In the quiet hours of the night, when the distraction of your attention is gone, she is forced to confront the reality of her own choices. Your silence becomes a physical presence, a heavy shadow in her mind every time she expects a notification, a plea, or a sign of desperation, and receives nothing but the quiet hum of your absence. Her own pride does the rest. She realizes she lost a man who can govern himself, and that realization is more haunting than any loud argument could ever be. This empty space becomes a powerful gravitational center. Because you withdrew your performance, she finds herself orbiting the empty space you refuse to fill. Your absence becomes louder than any speech you could have delivered. She leans into the void, hoping to catch some signal from a man who proved he was strong enough to stand alone. Pulled back to a center she realizes she cannot control. Freedom from perception. Ultimately, you reach a point where stillness is no longer a strategic shield or a way to earn respect. If you are quiet so people think you are powerful, you are still performing. If you are withholding reactions so someone regrets losing you, you are still performing. The audience has simply changed, but the stage remains, and your freedom is still on loan. True stillness begins when there is nobody left to impress. You become quiet because you have decided that your peace is too valuable to be traded for anyone's applause. You become still because you no longer need the world's permission to be who you are. You can be misunderstood, you can be disliked, and you can let others tell a story where you are the villain because you are no longer looking for your identity in their eyes. This is the moment you stop performing attractiveness. That is the exact moment it appears. When you no longer ask for permission or plead to be desired, your unforced center becomes an immovable anchor. If you have seen the equestrian statue of Marcus Aurelius in Rome, you have seen this posture. A man sitting on a horse with a calm, grounded presence, unmoved by the chaos around him. He does not reach. He does not announce his authority. He simply exists as a solid landmark in a drifting world. This complete self-possession is the most attractive force a man can possess. It is not a social trick. It is the ultimate freedom. A man who has nothing to prove can love without clinging, speak without needing to dominate, and remain silent without carrying resentment. He does not need to win the room because he already owns his mind, and the room has no choice but to lean helplessly toward his unforced sovereign gravity. If any of this found something real in you tonight, comment "I stay unshaken" below. Not as a performance, as a quiet decision. Subscribe to Stoic Horology if you want more of this. Share it with one man who keeps reaching when he should be still. Desire follows the man who has stopped asking. I stay unshaken.